Have you ever heard of Davy Crockett? Well, as baby boomers, both Tanya and I certainly have. And now we're going to investigate a little bit further. Who was Davy Crockett? Where was he born? Let's hear a little bit more about it. So today we're going to investigate Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier. If you're new to our channel, we're Tanya and Jay, a couple of retired goofballs who wander the world looking for fun, adventure, the unusual, and sometimes the absurd. If at some time during this video you enjoy it, please give us a thumbs up, and if you don't enjoy it, well, just kind of keep it to yourselves. You can still give us comments, though. We appreciate that. Well, those of us who grew up in the early 1950s certainly remember the stories of Davy Crockett. Walt Disney came out with his movie, Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, in 1955. That would have been the time I was 7 years old, or in the second grade. Tanya, of course, wasn't born yet. Anyway, this is the birthplace of Davy Crockett in Limestone, Tennessee, which actually was North Carolina at the time he was born, because Tennessee wasn't technically really a state. So when we, as kids, remember the Ballad of Davy Crockett, and it starts out born on a mountaintop in Tennessee. Okay, greenest state in the land of the free, raised in the woods so he knew every tree, shot himself a bar there when he was only 3. I doubt that. I really doubt that, especially because rifles at that time were so long and heavy. But, never let the facts get in the way of a good story. Apparently, Davy Crockett was a very rebellious young boy and really didn't like going to school. His dad was always mad at him because he was skipping out, even hired a tutor for him for about 6 months to see if they could educate him, and, it sort of worked out okay. Davy became, in his life, sort of larger than life, and he promoted himself heavily. He is probably one of the first politicians to go on a book tour of his own book. The country, this was when he was served in Congress, promoting this book. And there are all these myths and legends that grew up around him, that he was this sort of super mystical guy. When he was in Congress, he served 2 terms in Congress at one point, then he lost election, then he came back and served again. His colleagues in the Congress looked at him as kind of a hick because the way he talked, but he was very plain spoken, said what he meant, and to the people of Tennessee, his constituents, they looked at him as a rugged frontiersman who said it like it was. But throughout his life, there were a number of books that were written about him that burnished his image, that he was a very brave woodsman and frontier, and apparently in one year he did kill about 105 bears. Now, I'm sure he didn't do it with his bare hands, but there are lots of illustrations that show him with an axe in one hand and a bloody knife in the other. There are illustrations that show him riding alligators, one under each foot. One that shows him riding a bolt of lightning. He could jump across rivers. There were all sorts of things. And so by the time he finally went to the Alamo to join up with Sam Houston in fighting for Texas independence from Mexico, this was like Superman coming to the Alamo to join these Texas fighters. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for Davy or any of the others there. But in any case, Davy gave a great deal of inspiration to the Texas fighters, and they ultimately were able to defeat Mexico and gain their independence. This is the homestead of Davy Crockett. He lived here until he was 7 years old, and it's on the banks of this river. Apparently, according to the couple of the guides here, the park rangers, his family were squatters. They actually didn't own this land at all, but he stayed here until he was 7 years old. As you can tell, it's raining right now. I hope this doesn't interfere, but let's carry on. Tanya and I have braved the rainstorm and are now in this little shelter, and it gives a little summary of the life of Davy Crockett. Quite interesting.
Very interesting.
Davy didn't have any education until he was a teenager. He was hired out to other people to cut wood and so forth to bring in additional income for their family while he was a child. He ran away from home for almost 3 years. He got as far as Baltimore, and then he returned in 1802. He married Polly Finley. They had a couple of sons. She died of malaria. He married someone else. Then it goes on, and then he had all these adventures. In 1826, he was almost killed when his flatboat crashed into an island. And apparently there are lots of times where he narrowly escaped death, and he made sure that everyone knew about it and kind of embellished that image of himself. Before he went to Texas to join up with the Republic of Texas fighters, he was kind of pissed off that he had lost the election to Congress. And so in essence, he said, "To hell with you guys, I'm going to Texas," and so that's what he did. Not sure that was the smartest move, but that's what he did. And the fact that he was killed at the Alamo just increased the legend of Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett had quite an impact on children of my age when I was 7 years old in 1955. He was the quintessential American outdoorsman, frontiersman, and hero. We had coonskin caps, although the one I had, I'm sure it wasn't real coonskin. I think it was made of cotton or, some material, maybe nylon. I don't know, who knows. And we had Davy Crockett lunch boxes, lunch pails that we had to school, and everything was, Davy Crockett. That was really cool. He kind of replaced my favorite cowboy, who was Hopalong Cassidy, up until that point. But anyway, so that was Davy Crockett. So the impetus for today's adventure started in April when we were in Paris, and I was chatting with a French policeman who asked me where we were from, and when I said Tennessee, his immediate reaction was, "Oh, Davy Crockett." I thought, yes, of course, Davy Crockett. So that's why we're here. Plus, one of our regular viewers wanted us to find out more about Davy Crockett because he associated Tennessee with that, and so that's why we're here. So right now we're in the Crockett Tavern in Morristown, Tennessee, where the Crockett family moved, and they had operated a tavern here, and then they lived upstairs. And so Davy Crockett actually lived here for several years of his young life. And so they've got it all set up here. Here's your frontier kind of, you got a bearskin rug, and you got a bed, and it's this your basic frontier kind of tower. A spinning wheel, that's right. And here's one of the spinners right here, the lovely Tanya.
Hello.
So this is the upstairs of the tavern, and this is where guests would stay, and there would be traveling businessmen, merchants, and so forth, and they would sleep, according to the proprietor here, 3 or 4 to a bed, which would be very cozy. I think even 2 in this. I wouldn't call this a queen. What would you call it, Tanya?
Maybe a double. That looks like barely a double.
Maybe a double. And of course you have your chamber pot underneath here, so if you have to go do your business in the middle of the night, there you go. So as I mentioned once before, after Davy Crockett lost his last congressional election and said, "To hell with you guys, I'm going to Texas," here is a quote that's on a bumper sticker that says, "You may all go to hell, I will go to Texas." So that's exactly what he did. That's right. He moved here with his family when he was 7 years old and stayed here until he was about 20. So that first place that we went to, the birthplace of Davy Crockett, was along the Chuckey river, and there was a big flood. And his dad had a mill, and the flood wiped out the mill and everything around it. And so they said, "We're out of here," and they decided to come here to Morristown. The building we've just been in here, the tavern, is a replica. Is not the original one. The original one was just not very far from here. Now, maybe 50 yards or so, and was used as a hospital during the Civil War for smallpox, and they burned it down for health reasons. Did I forget anything, Tanya?
I don't think so.
Really?
Not that I
You're
can
a
think
real
of.
sweetheart. This is my little Davy Crockett right here. She's the queen of the wild frontier. That's the end of today's adventure as we discovered Davy Crockett and his origins. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, give us a like, and we'll see you again next week where we have something new and exciting that we're not even sure what it is yet, but I'm sure
It will be.
it will be. Okay, bye-bye.